This is the Pentax K-3 Mark III, Pentax's latest APS-C flagship camera. It caused quite the stir when it was released last year, being a brand new DSLR in the age of the mirrorless. But beyond the controversy and the usual ridicule Pentax gets in the media nowadays, the question is, does this camera live up to the die-hard Pentaxians' expectations? Well, as a self-proclaimed die-hard Pentaxian, I'd like to answer that question. Let me be perfectly clear. I am biased. The only thing that would make me more biased would be if Pentax was paying me to recommend their products. But lucky for them, they don't, and I still do. My first DSLR was a Pentax K-3III, which I loved, and then moved around the K series, including the original K-3, which I still consider to this day my all-time favorite camera. So then, you may think this review is a done deal. Of course I'm gonna love the K-3 Mark III. Well, not exactly. You see, I'm a cheap, practical, and hobbyist photographer. There needs to be a good enough reason to spend hundreds more on a new camera versus the very legitimate option of just sticking with the original K-3. I've broken this video into sections based on the most relevant features of the Pentax K-3 Mark III to me, the things that I thought about before purchasing one. Let me get the first big one out of the way, the one that everybody wants to know: autofocus. Now, it's no secret that Pentax's autofocus lags behind the competition. Before someone jumps on me for admitting that, let me just say, I'm the first to say that good technique goes a long way, and camera reviewers in recent years have way overemphasized the importance of the absolute fastest autofocus. But this is an area where Pentax struggles to keep up with the times, and the Pentax K-3 promises much better performance. I don't have any modern comparable cameras to test against, but others have, and I'll just say if you're interested in that, you can reference those comparisons. Coming from older Pentax models, I will say this definitely feels like a step in the right direction. I've noticed consistent improvement, particularly in low light autofocus speed, less times where the camera hunts all the way from front to back, and improvements in speed locking onto a subject that's moving or stationary when you haven't already pre-focused. This definitely still feels like Pentax autofocus, but a much better version. It's important to note I'm using the DA-Star 300mm f4 for most of my time on this camera, as I bought it for wildlife and action. It's not the fastest focusing lens either, so in my mind it's probably only better with newer glass. And from what I hear, in the Pentax world, the best upgrade for your autofocus may not be the latest camera, but getting one of the newer PLM lenses. Just food for thought. Now let's talk about handling. The original K-3 was my favorite handling camera of all time, so it was really important to me that the K-3 Mark III held true to that standard, and I'm happy to say that it did. The button placement is great, the grip is wonderfully deep and comfortable to hold. It feels like a sporty, fast, comfortable camera. As far as buttons go, there are some improvements over the original K-3, like you have this new top dial that you can customize and a new top function button. You have a joystick on the back, which I have found handy. I don't use it very much, but it's there for those who like joysticks. And then finally, it even has a new touchscreen, which I admit I was not too excited about at first. For being a millennial, I am surprisingly adverse to touchscreens, but Pentax really nailed the integration of this one, and it blends seamlessly into the camera design. I've never once had it register a press when I didn't want it to, and when you do use it, it is very responsive. You can also choose to turn it off and never use it, and the camera functions all the same without it. Perfect. And while we're on the screen, let me insert my brief rant about the screen not being tilting like the KP or articulating like the K1. I just wish it did. There. there's my rant. I said it would be brief. Let me talk next about the lack of GPS. At first, Pentax's choice to exclude the GPS on this camera really put me off, and it's kind of for a silly reason. I really love the Astrotracer feature Pentax has, where it uses the GPS and other sensors to correctly move the sensor to track stars in the sky. I thought it worked brilliantly for what it is on my Pentax K1, and has let me get my feet wet into an otherwise costly genre of photography. Pentax fixed that for me in January when it released a firmware update that included a new Astrotracer version that does not use GPS. Instead, it takes multiple exposures and uses that to track star movement based on where you're pointing in the sky. And it works even better than GPS Astrotracer in some situations. So good job, Pentax. I love this feature. And for those that want a GPS, you could put one of these things on top of your camera too. Now let's talk about high ISO performance and general image quality. I did not buy this camera to get better ISO performance or image quality. I thought my Pentax KP did beautifully in this regard, and I have no complaints. But if I'm buying a brand new camera anyway, I do kind of expect things to be better. The short of it is that if you're coming from the K3 or K3 II, you'll appreciate a noticeable leap in high ISO performance and a little in IQ overall. If you're coming from a KP, there's not a noticeable difference in my opinion. You could probably pixel peep at 300% and see a difference. But from shooting both the KP and K3 Mark III for quite a lot of wildlife images, I couldn't tell you the difference in a blind test. Video. The Pentax K3 Mark III does take video. And in classic Pentax style over the years, they've once again put a microphone and headphone jack on the camera, while all other video features are very lackluster. I won't harp on this long. I know people who buy Pentax cameras are not looking to do video exclusively, so I'll just say this. It's the best Pentax video yet, offering now a 4K resolution that looks better than any previous Pentax camera. But it still takes worse 4K video than my much older Panasonic. For what it's worth, since January I've shot all my camera product shots on this channel using it. I think it looks fine, nobody's complained. Now let's talk about the Viewfinder, which I'm only mentioning because Pentax made a big deal of it in their marketing. Pretty much all their marketing was on the Viewfinder, which uses some new fancy system that they made to make it the biggest, brightest APS-C viewfinder ever, or something like that. And I must say, it does look better than looking through my older crop DSLRs. And I keep thinking that this must have some sort of advantage, tracking wildlife in low light with it, letting in more light and all that. And it does look nice. But once again here, I just don't notice any practical difference in my photography. But I say if you're gonna double down on DSLRs, you might as well make the best OVFs ever. Now there's a lot more to say about this camera, and I mean a lot. It is a photographer's camera through and through. Loads of features like pixel shift, in-camera blending modes, 5 customizable user modes on a dial and 5 more in the menus. You can customize just about all the buttons. It has incredible features for adapting vintage lenses like this focus confirmation. It has great weather sealing, it shoots at a high frames per second. I could go on and on, but just know that it's still refreshingly Pentax in its focus on the photographers and the photographic experience. I tried to keep this video brief, it turned out long, and I still haven't even scratched the surface of this camera. In truth, I feel like I'm only using a fraction of its capabilities. But it's a camera that excites me. It's like a new mountain bike that gives me confidence to try harder and harder features. It's a camera I hope to grow into more as the years go on. It's a Pentax through and through, and I couldn't be happier with it. Thanks for watching, and as always, go out there and make some beautiful photographs with whatever gear you happen to have. And until next time, happy snapping.